Imagine for a moment having the power to direct your mind as a master craftsman shapes clay. What if I told you that the key to achieving true health, abundance, and inner peace lies in the ability to focus your mind on what you truly desire? In this text, How to Direct the Mind Toward Health and Abundance, Phineas Quimby, a visionary pioneer of the human mind, opens the door to a world filled with infinite possibilities. Through his revolutionary teachings, you will discover how positive thinking, unshakable faith in yourself, and a deep connection with your own mind can completely transform your reality. With every word, you will be guided on a journey of self-discovery and inner power. Quimby not only shows us the path to healing, but also how to attract the abundance we deserve, how to master the energies that surround us, and how to take control of our own experience. The mind is the beacon, and by understanding its immense power, you will learn to navigate the turbulent waters of life, creating a future filled with well-being, prosperity, and balance. This is more than just a text. It is an invitation to reinvent yourself, to free your mind from self-imposed limits, and to embrace a life of fulfillment. Get ready to change the way you think and transform your life forever. Humanity has believed that the body governs the mind, that the environment defines existence, that circumstances are external forces shaping the destiny of every human being. However, this is a fundamental mistake, a deception that has kept humanity chained to disease, scarcity, and suffering. The truth is that the mind is the origin of all reality. Illness does not arise from the body, but from a mistaken belief that has taken root in consciousness. Poverty is not the result of invisible economic forces, but the manifestation of a mind weakened by doubt and fear. Suffering, in all its forms, is essentially the projection of erroneous ideas that have been accepted without question. But just as the mind has created these shadows, it can also dispel them with the light of truth. For years, I have observed how men and women who have come to me have been trapped in invisible prisons built by their own thoughts. They arrive with broken bodies, defeated spirits, burdened by the weight of ideas imposed by generations of ignorance. They look at me with hope and despair, believing I possess some miraculous gift that can free them. Yet the truth I reveal to them is this: it is not I who heals them, but the understanding that they were never truly sick, only deceived. This book is not a treatise on material remedies or mystical formulas. It is not a compendium of superstitions disguised as science. It is a revelation, a guide for those who wish to shed the mental slavery in which they have lived and begin to direct their thoughts with purpose, clarity, and power. As you read these pages, you will learn that every idea you accept without question becomes a seed that germinates in your life. If you sow ideas of illness, your body will respond with ailments. Sow ideas of failure, and your path will be filled with obstacles. But if instead you learn the art of thinking, if you cultivate in your mind only those ideas that strengthen your being, then health, abundance, and peace will flow to you effortlessly. This knowledge is not new, though it has been forgotten. It is not magic, though its effects seem miraculous to those who have never known the power of the mind. It is the universal truth, the immutable law that governs all existence. Each chapter of this book will be a key that opens a door in your consciousness. With each page, the chains of imposed thought will weaken until they finally break. And when that happens, when you fully understand that your mind is the architect of your destiny, then you will no longer need me or any other teacher, because you will have found the truth within yourself. Now, if you are ready to discover how the mind shapes reality, if you wish to learn to think with intention and transform your life from its roots, move forward. The truth awaits to be discovered, and when you find it, you will be free. How to Direct the Mind Toward Health and Abundance, by Phineas Quimby. We have noticed that over 90% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and giving the video a like. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1: Illness and Scarcity, Shadows of Mental Error. Humanity has been trained to believe in illness and scarcity as inevitable realities, as unbreakable facts that govern existence. We have been taught that the body is doomed to fragility and that life is a constant struggle against lack. Yet what few understand is that these experiences are nothing more than shadows projected by a mental error. All illness begins in thought before manifesting in the body. It is not the climate, genetic inheritance, or microorganisms that determine a man's health, but the beliefs he has accepted as true. If someone fears illness, expects it, observes it in others, and recognizes it as an inevitable part of life, then they invite it to settle within them. Likewise, whoever believes in scarcity, who fears poverty and sees it around every corner, ends up attracting it and turning it into their own experience. Thought, that invisible and powerful energy, is the root of everything man experiences. His body, his environment, his relationships, and his fortune are nothing more than reflections of the ideas that have dominated his mind. If thought is weak and confused, life will be chaotic and uncertain. If thought is filled with fears and doubts, illness and scarcity will be its inevitable guests. The fundamental error sustaining these shadows is the belief in separation. Man has been taught that his mind and body are separate entities, that his life is governed by external forces, and that he has no power over what happens around him. But this is not true. The mind is the source of all experience, and when it is guided by truth, the body regains its natural balance, and life responds with abundance. Observe those who live in illness. They are unaware, but they have accepted the idea that their ailment is part of them, that it is incurable, that it is real. They endlessly repeat the names of their conditions, seek external explanations for their state, but never question the origin of their suffering. They do not understand that illness is nothing more than the manifestation of a mistaken thought, a mental programming reinforced by repetition and passive acceptance. In the same way, scarcity is not the result of a cruel fate or an unjust social structure, but the reflection of a mental state. Those who believe in lack, who constantly think about what they don't have, who fear losing the little they possess, perpetuate their own deprivation. Wealth, like health, is a state of consciousness before being a material condition. But if illness and scarcity are just shadows, then what is the light that can dispel them? Truth. The truth is that the body is not designed to get sick, but to regenerate and remain in balance. The truth is that the universe is abundant and poverty is merely a mental construct. The truth is that thought is the only real cause of experience, and when man awakens to this truth, when he stops feeding the shadows with his belief, they disappear. Whoever understands this does not fear illness because they know their body is merely an extension of their thought and that their health is under their control. They do not fear scarcity because they understand that abundance is not something to chase, but something to recognize within oneself. But understanding alone is not enough. It is not sufficient to read these words and silently agree. There must be action. There must be a radical change in the way of thinking and perceiving the world. The mind must be trained, strengthened, and directed with precision to eradicate error and replace it with truth. Throughout this book, you will discover the methods to achieve this transformation. You will learn how to observe your thoughts, how to correct them, and how to cleanse them from the illusions that have kept you enslaved. But first, you must accept a fundamental truth. Everything you have believed about illness and scarcity has been a deception. If you are willing to challenge these beliefs, if you have the courage to look beyond what the world has taught you, then you are ready to uncover the art of thinking. For only the one who learns to think clearly, without fear and free from imposed limitations, can direct their life toward health and abundance. Shadows only exist as long as you believe in them. The light of truth is always present, patiently waiting to be recognized. Chapter 2. Truth and Falsehood, How Beliefs Shape Experience. From the moment we are born, our mind is fertile soil where beliefs are planted. Some are seeds of truth that blossom into wisdom, but most are false concepts that grow like weeds, eventually choking the very essence of life. What a person believes is exactly what they will experience, and if they have been taught falsehoods, their life will mirror that error. Every thought one holds is a cause, and sooner or later, it will bear fruit in their reality. If the idea of bodily fragility takes root in their mind, they will live in constant fear of falling ill, and that fear will eventually shape their fate. If they believe poverty is a natural state, all their actions will align with that conviction and reinforce their lack. But if a person awakens to the fact that their mind is the origin of their world, and that truth is the only force capable of transforming their destiny, then illness and misery will vanish like fog before the morning sun. The deception of falsehood. Since childhood, the mind is conditioned with ideas that are never questioned. Children are told that the cold makes them sick, that germs are attackers, that aging inevitably leads to decay. They are taught that money is hard to come by, that wealth is reserved for a select few, and that sacrifice and struggle are the only paths to prosperity. And because the child has no critical filter yet, they accept these ideas as absolute truths, unaware they are being programmed to live a life of limitation. But falsehood, no matter how widely accepted, never becomes truth. The masses may believe in disease, but that does not make illness an unchangeable law. They may see poverty as inevitable, but nature itself tells a different story. The earth yields fruit in abundance, rivers flow effortlessly, and the sun shines without charging for its light. It is man, through his mistaken thinking, who has disconnected from the truth of abundance and wholeness. False beliefs act like a blindfold on humanity. A man who believes he is sick will feel every symptom intensely, even if the real cause lies not in his body, but in his mind. A person who sees themselves as unlucky will interpret every situation as proof of their tragic fate, even as opportunities pass right before their eyes, unnoticed. The power of truth. But if falsehood holds such power over the human mind, what happens when truth is planted instead? Transformation occurs. The truth is that the body does not fall ill by chance, but because the mind has accepted the idea of disease. The truth is that scarcity is not the result of external forces, but the product of an internal conviction of lack. The truth is that thought is the only true cause of experience, and that by correcting thought, reality must, by law, adjust to this new perception. Truth is the unchanging principle that governs all existence. It needs no defense, no proof, only discovery. And when a person dares to question what they have believed their entire life and opens their mind to the possibility that they have been deceived, the light of truth begins to dissolve the shadows of falsehood. I have seen people who, after years of suffering, healed in an instant upon realizing they were never truly sick, just mistaken. I have seen men turn their destinies from misery to prosperity simply by letting go of the belief in lack, not because a miracle occurred, but because by changing their thoughts, they changed their reality. The process of correction. But knowing the truth is not enough. It must be applied. A person conditioned by falsehood must uproot the erroneous beliefs that have dominated their mind. This begins with an act of courage, to question everything they have accepted as true until now. When a thought of illness arises, they must ask, is this really true, or is it a lie I've accepted without question? When fear of poverty creeps in, they must reflect, does this idea have any real basis, or is it just the echo of beliefs imposed by others? And upon realizing that their fears and limitations are nothing more than mental constructs, they can begin replacing them with thoughts aligned with truth. This is how the process of transformation begins. The mind is a powerful instrument, but it only functions properly when it operates under truth. As long as it is guided by falsehood, it will continue generating illness, scarcity, and suffering. But when truth becomes its sole guiding principle, life responds with health, prosperity, and fulfillment. Man is what he believes himself to be. He lives what he believes is possible. If his beliefs are false, his life will become a prison. But if his beliefs align with truth, then there will be no limits to what he can experience. The choice is always in his hands. Chapter 3. The power of attention, what you believe you create. Thought is the seed of every experience, but it is attention that waters and nourishes that seed until it becomes reality. The human mind is like a beam of light, illuminating and giving life to whatever it focuses on. Where attention is directed, belief is strengthened, and where belief is strengthened, experience materializes. The person who understands this can radically transform their life, but the one who ignores this law remains a prisoner of unconscious thoughts, trapped in a cycle of suffering they unknowingly perpetuate. If someone focuses their attention on illness, if they speak of it, fear it, observe it in others, and expect it in themselves, then they have made it real. The mind does not differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. It simply follows the direction of attention. Similarly, whoever focuses on scarcity, fears a lack of money, constantly worries about the future, and sees poverty as an inevitable force in the world, will eventually attract it into their life, because their mind has been trained to recognize lack instead of abundance. What a person gives strong and emotional attention to will inevitably become their experience, for attention is the spark that ignites the manifestation of any idea. I have clearly observed that people who come to me seeking healing do not suffer from the supposed illness affecting their bodies, but from the fixation of their minds on the idea that they are sick. They have been taught to believe that pain is inevitable, that the body is fragile, and that aging will lead them to inevitable decline. Their attention has been trained to notice every sign of discomfort and to reinforce their fear with each new symptom. Thus, illness becomes as tangible a reality to them as the ground they walk on, not because the illness exists independently, but because their consciousness has created it through the constant observation of its possibility. Yet just as attention can create disease, it can also create health. Just as it can bring about scarcity, it can also attract abundance. The key lies in learning to direct it intentionally and not allowing it to wander uncontrolled through the paths of fear and doubt. The mind is fertile ground where any idea can flourish if given enough energy and focus. Whoever directs their attention to health recognizes their body as strong, balanced, and self-regenerating, and rejects the idea that illness has any power, lays the foundation for a life free from affliction. And whoever, instead of focusing on lack, places their attention on the infinite possibility of abundance, who sees wealth everywhere and opens themselves to the idea that the universe is inherently generous, will begin to experience prosperity in unexpected ways. Attention is not a passive act of the mind, but the force that shapes existence. It is not about fighting against thoughts or resisting what has already manifested, but about withdrawing energy from what is undesired and placing it upon what one wishes to see expand in life. Everything a person resists, they reinforce, because resistance is also a form of attention. Whoever fights against illness is still thinking about it. Whoever complains about poverty continues to give it power. But whoever ignores the appearance of limitation and keeps their focus on the higher reality of health and wealth will inevitably see their world transformed. The great mistake of humanity has been to believe that what is perceived through the senses is the ultimate reality, when in truth it is only the shadow of internal beliefs. The mind should not be a passive mirror reflecting what it sees, but a beacon projecting the light of what it has chosen to believe. If a person sees suffering around them and accepts that vision as unchangeable, they become part of it. But if, in the midst of difficulty, they can maintain their attention firmly on the possibility of a different life, if they can sustain the conviction that well-being and fulfillment are their natural birthright, then, by the very law of thought, their world must change. Nothing can exist in a person's experience without their mental consent. If they have accepted fear, if they have allowed their attention to be captured by ideas of weakness and lack, then they are creating precisely what they fear. But if they take control of their focus, if they refuse to feed thoughts of failure and sickness, if they direct their attention toward health, strength, and prosperity with the certainty that these already exist within, then reality must respond to this new vision. The first step in reclaiming power over life is to observe where attention has been fixed until now. Has it been focused on the possibility of well-being or on the fear of illness? Has it been rooted in gratitude for present abundance or in anxiety over what is lacking? Life is nothing more than a reflection of these focuses, and changing the outcome is not a matter of chance or external effort, but of a profound transformation in the way one thinks. There is no mystery in the process of mental creation. What is attended to with emotion, conviction, and repetition becomes the structure of existence. Whoever holds a clear image of themselves as whole, healthy, and prosperous, without allowing doubt to divert them from that vision, will inevitably see that image manifest in reality, not because they have invoked some external force, but because they have understood the truth of their own creative power. This principle has been ignored for centuries, but its effect is inevitable. The person who believes in disease will experience it. The one who believes in scarcity will encounter it in their life. And the one who holds the certainty that their mind shapes their destiny will sculpt a life filled with health, wealth, and fulfillment. What you believe, you create. What you give your attention to expands. What you feed with your energy becomes your world. Chapter 4. Mental Contagion. How Collective Beliefs Ensnared Humanity. The mind of man does not exist in isolation. From birth, Each individual is submerged in a sea of foreign thoughts, in a world where the beliefs of past generations have been accepted as unshakable truths. These ideas are transmitted from person to person like an invisible disease, and whoever is unaware of their influence becomes their prisoner without even realizing it. This phenomenon, which I call mental contagion, is the root of most human suffering. It conditions the perception of reality and limits the power of individual thought. The illnesses that afflict the body and the miseries that burden existence are nothing more than manifestations of collective ideas that have been adopted without question. Society has created a system in which illness is expected, scarcity is seen as a normal condition, aging is synonymous with weakness, and the individual mind, constantly exposed to these beliefs, accepts them as inevitable laws. People are told that certain ailments are hereditary, that certain diseases are incurable, that life is a constant struggle, and by believing this, they end up experiencing it as their personal reality. What most people ignore is that these conditions do not exist independently. They are products of the collective mind, reflections of accumulated thoughts that have taken form in human experience. This contagion of beliefs occurs silently. It spreads through education, daily conversations, and the observation of others. A child who grows up watching adults get sick with the arrival of winter will learn to fear the cold, and in adulthood will manifest the same symptoms when the weather changes, not because cold is the true cause of illness, but because their mind has been programmed to react in that way. Similarly, someone raised in a home where money is scarce, where there is constant talk of the difficulty of earning it, and where wealth is seen as an unattainable privilege, will absorb that idea and build a life in accordance with it, limiting their own access to abundance. But if collective beliefs have trapped humanity in sickness and scarcity, then the question is, how can this cycle be broken? The first step is recognition. Most people never question where their ideas about health, wealth, or life itself come from. They simply repeat them, reinforce them, and live by them. But one who awakens to the understanding that their thoughts are not entirely their own, but have been imposed by the collective mind, gains the power to choose. They begin to see that illness is not an inevitable destiny, but a thought pattern that can be changed. They realize that scarcity is not an external force oppressing them, but a projection of inherited beliefs. And with this knowledge, the possibility of a new reality opens up. However, breaking free from collective beliefs requires courage. Whoever chooses to stray from common thinking will be viewed with skepticism by those still trapped within it. Society ridicules those who challenge its dogmas, for the collective mind fears being dismantled. They will be told they are denying reality, that illness is a proven fact, that scarcity is a matter of economics and not of thought. But one who has understood the truth will not be swayed by the doubts of others. They know that their experience is not dictated by what the world believes, but by what they themselves choose to believe. This is why the second step to free oneself from mental contagion is selective isolation from collective thinking. This does not mean physically separating from others, but rather protecting the mind from the influence of erroneous beliefs. One must be careful with what they listen to, what they read, what they allow into their consciousness. The mind is fertile ground, and if it is constantly fed ideas of illness, limitation, and failure, then those ideas will take root and manifest in the individual's life. But if instead thoughts of health, abundance, and strength are cultivated, then reality will reflect that new direction. The final step is to constantly affirm the truth until it becomes the only reality accepted by the mind. Every day, the individual must remind themselves that illness has no power over them, that scarcity is merely a reflection of mistaken beliefs, that well-being is their natural state. They must replace every thought of doubt with a declaration of certainty, every idea of weakness with a conviction of strength. The collective mind may have programmed human thought, but man always has the power to reprogram his own mind. Humanity has lived too long under the dominion of common thinking. It has been hypnotized by the repetition of false ideas, subjugated by the weight of tradition, and chained by the acceptance of a world that is nothing more than a projection of its own fears. But the time of ignorance is over. The moment of awakening has come, And whoever has the courage to challenge the collective mind, to reject the contagion of falsehood, and to affirm the truth with firmness, will become the sole master of their destiny. Collective beliefs have ensnared humanity for centuries, but a single true thought is enough to undo an entire lifetime of error. Chapter 5. Breaking the chains of borrowed thought. The man who does not question his thoughts lives trapped in a world he has not chosen. Since birth, his mind has been shaped by others, his beliefs inherited without examination, and his perception of reality dictated by those who came before him. He has been told what is possible and what is not, what he should fear and what he should accept, how he should live, and even how he should die. But these invisible chains are not forged by truth but by custom. They are not a real prison, but a mirage that only persists as long as the man does not dare to look beyond what he has been taught. Breaking free from borrowed thought is the first act of true freedom. It means challenging everything that has been imposed without reflection. It means taking every idea and holding it up to the light of reason to see if it withstands the test of truth. And when this is done sincerely, it is discovered that most of what man has believed is nothing more than an accumulation of unfounded assumptions, transmitted fears, and rules invented to maintain the order of a society that has not yet understood the power of the individual mind. But most do not dare to undertake this examination. Borrowed thought offers the comfort of the familiar, the safety of the established. He who follows the current of the majority avoids the effort of thinking for himself, avoids the responsibility of creating his own destiny. However, this comfort is a trap, for to live under the dominion of foreign ideas is to renounce the possibility of transformation. It means accepting illness as inevitable, scarcity as a natural condition, suffering as an inescapable aspect of existence. It means living according to rules that were not consciously chosen, but imposed by the environment, by culture, by generations of men who also did not know they had the power to decide their own reality. But how are these chains broken? How can man free himself from borrowed thought and reclaim the dominion of his mind? The first step is the recognition of the deception. As long as man believes that his thoughts are his own, when in reality they have been implanted, he will remain enslaved by them. He must begin to observe himself, to ask where his ideas about health, wealth, success, and happiness come from. Who taught him that the body is fragile? Who told him that abundance is difficult to achieve? Who defined the limits of his capacity? And when he analyzes each of these beliefs, he will find that they did not originate within him, but were imposed by education, by society, by the unquestioned repetition of entire generations. The second step is the dissolution of fear. The reason men cling to false beliefs is not because they consider them true, but because they fear what will happen if they let them go. The sick fear giving up their diagnosis because without it, they would not know how to explain their discomfort. The poor fear ceasing to believe in scarcity, because if abundance is possible for them, then they will have no excuses for their condition. He who has suffered all his life fears accepting that happiness is within his grasp, for then he would have to face the fact that it has been himself who has deprived him of it. But the truth does not reveal itself to those who fear to see it. Only he who is willing to let go of the false securities of borrowed thought can open himself to the immensity of his own power. The third step is the adoption of conscious thought. Breaking with collective programming is not enough if it is not replaced with a new mental structure based on truth. Here, man must learn to think for himself, to direct his attention toward what he wants to experience, to reject any idea that does not serve the life he desires to build. He must train his mind to filter what he hears, to choose what he believes, to take control of his own perception. He who has broken the chains of borrowed thought no longer accepts illness as something natural, but sees it as a reflection of a mental error that can be corrected. He no longer considers scarcity as an imposed fate, but as a condition generated by the mind and therefore reversible. He is no longer swayed by the fear that paralyzes the masses, for he knows that fear only has power over those who accept it as truth. This process is not easy. It means moving away from the crowd, walking a path few have traveled. It means facing the incomprehension of those who still live under the hypnosis of collective thought. But the reward is absolute freedom, the ability to shape reality with thought, to choose the experience one desires to live, to be the master of one's own existence without being conditioned by the minds of others. The man who achieves this ceases to be a victim. and becomes a creator. He is no longer dragged by the ideas of the world, but chooses his thoughts with the precision of an architect designing his masterpiece. And when a man thinks with total freedom, when every idea in his mind is his own and not a reflection of what others have imposed, then he has found the secret of mental power, the key that allows him to build the life he has always desired. Breaking free from borrowed thought is the first act of true independence, and whoever achieves it not only liberates himself, but becomes a beacon for those who do not yet know they are prisoners. For the human mind, once it has discovered its power, can no longer be enslaved by falsehood. It can only move forward, expand, and manifest with absolute certainty the reality it has chosen for itself. Chapter 6. The Art of Inquiry, Dismantling the Deception. The human mind is a vast terrain where countless beliefs have been sown, many so deeply rooted that they seem to be part of the very structure of reality. However, not everything man thinks is true, and much of what he takes for granted is merely a reflection of the conditioning he has been subjected to since birth. If illness, scarcity, and suffering were immutable laws, then all men would be condemned to them without exception. Yet there are those who live in perfect health, who enjoy effortless abundance, and who walk through life without fear or burdens. The difference does not lie in fate, luck, or some external force, but in their way of thinking. The deception in the mind is not a dark force acting from outside, but an internal construct that only persists as long as it goes unquestioned. There is no prison more impenetrable than the one man builds within himself, and none easier to tear down than one that has no real foundations. But to dismantle the error, one must first see it, and here is where the art of inquiry comes into play. To inquire is not simply to doubt, but to thoroughly examine every thought one has and every belief one has accepted as true. It is to ask oneself with absolute honesty, where does this idea come from? Why do I believe it? Does it have real foundations, or have I merely repeated it without question? It is a process of mental dissection, where each belief is exposed to the light of reason and observation, allowing those that are true to be strengthened and those that are false to fade away. This method of inquiry must be applied rigorously, for the mind clings to what is familiar, even when what is familiar is an error. He who has lived under the constant fear of illness finds it difficult to accept that illness is a mental illusion, for his body itself has responded to that idea for years. But the key question here is, what is stronger, the truth or the belief in error? If illness were an immutable law, there would be no spontaneous healings, no cases of people regaining their health for no apparent reason when they stop being afraid. Yet such cases exist, and they prove that the body merely follows the direction imposed by the mind. Likewise, he who has lived under the weight of scarcity may find it hard to accept that abundance is his natural state. Society has reinforced the idea that money is scarce, that one must struggle and sacrifice to obtain it, that only a few can access wealth. But is this true, or is it merely a collectively accepted belief? If scarcity were real, there would be no people who, without apparent effort, live in constant prosperity. If wealth depended solely on hard work, then the most hard-working would be the richest, and yet this is rarely the case. The difference does not lie in the amount of work, but in the quality of thought. He who believes in abundance sees it manifest. He who fears scarcity attracts it. Each man must put his own beliefs to this test, not because someone else says so, but because the only truth that can transform a life is the truth one discovers for oneself. There is no power in repeating affirmations if deep down one still doubts them. The mind must be convinced, must clearly see the falsehood of its old paradigms and the solidity of the new truth it seeks to adopt. The process of inquiry is an act of courage, for it means letting go of what has long been considered true. The mind fears the unknown, and when a belief is dismantled, the ego resists, clings, and tries to justify its existence with all sorts of arguments. But he who persists in questioning, who keeps asking, who does not settle for vague answers but demands real evidence, sooner or later finds the truth. And the truth, once discovered, dissolves the error effortlessly, for light does not need to fight darkness. It simply replaces it. The man who learns this art is no longer a slave to collective thought. He no longer accepts ideas out of tradition, no longer fears what others fear, no longer submits to baseless beliefs. His mind becomes a sharp, precise instrument, capable of discerning truth from falsehood with absolute clarity. And when the mind operates under truth, Reality has no choice but to align with it. Illness disappears when one understands that the body only obeys mental orders and that a mind free of fear has no reason to create ailments. Scarcity dissolves when one realizes that the universe is abundant by nature and that the only limit to wealth is the belief in lack. Suffering vanishes when man ceases to identify with error and recognizes that his power resides in his thinking. He who masters the art of inquiry no longer needs anyone to tell him what is possible or impossible, what is true or false. He discovers it for himself, and in that freedom, he finds absolute power over his life. Chapter 7. The Science of Conviction, the Key to Transformation. The human mind is an ocean of possibilities, but the direction of its waters depends on a single force: conviction. It is not theoretical knowledge that transforms life, nor the mechanical repetition of positive thoughts, but the unwavering certainty with which an idea is held. Conviction is the bridge between thought and reality, the element that turns a simple affirmation into a living truth. Where there is doubt, the mind weakens and reality remains unchanged. Where there is absolute conviction, the world must respond accordingly. The fundamental mistake made by those who seek to transform their lives is attempting to do so without first establishing a firm conviction in their mind. They want health, but continue to fear illness. They desire abundance, but deep down still believe in scarcity. They cling to the possibility of change, but within them lingers the uncertainty of whether it is truly possible. And this hesitation is enough to nullify any attempt at transformation, for the mind does not respond to what man hopes for with insecurity, but to what he holds with unshakable certainty. It is not difficult to see how conviction shapes experience. One who is absolutely convinced that something will harm them will suffer the consequences of their belief, regardless of whether the cause is harmless. History is full of cases of people who have died from poisoning without having ingested anything toxic, simply because they believed they had. In the same way, there are those who have healed from incurable diseases merely because they were convinced that the cure was possible. It was neither the poison nor the medicine that determined the outcome, but the conviction with which the mind embraced the idea of life or death. This is how the law of thought operates. Reality is not determined by what is superficially said or wished, but by what is believed with absolute certainty. And conviction is the force that separates those who manage to change their destiny from those who remain trapped in the same circumstances, repeating affirmations without conviction and awaiting results that never come. The question then is, how does one cultivate conviction? The first step is the elimination of internal conflict. A mind that doubts is a divided mind, and a divided mind cannot manifest powerfully. One who says they want health but still fears illness is sending contradictory signals to their subconscious. One who declares a desire for wealth but still fears poverty is reinforcing the very condition they wish to change. For conviction to be solid, there can be no contradiction in thought. There must be a clear choice, leaving no room for uncertainty. The second step is repetition with emotional intensity. It is not enough to say, "I am healthy" or "I am prosperous" as a mechanical exercise. Words only have power when backed by deep emotion. The mind believes what it experiences with force, what it feels with certainty, what it internally lives as an undeniable reality. One who repeats an affirmation without emotion is simply playing with empty sounds. But one who speaks it with a profound sense of certainty is imprinting that idea onto their subconscious and their environment. The third step is the observation of evidence. The human mind seeks confirmations to strengthen its beliefs. If someone believes the world is a hostile place, their attention will focus on every piece of proof that reinforces that idea. If they believe life is abundant, they will find signs of prosperity everywhere. Conviction is strengthened when the mind is trained to seek and recognize proof that what is believed is true. If one wishes to solidify the certainty of health, it is necessary to focus on every sign of well-being, every recovery, every proof that the body has the capacity to regenerate. If one wishes to affirm abundance, one must learn to notice wealth in all its forms, in nature, in the generosity of the universe. The fourth step is the elimination of external influence. The collective mind is saturated with doubts, fears, and limiting beliefs. If someone wants to develop unshakable conviction, they cannot allow their thinking to be contaminated by the uncertainty of others. A person who wants to heal should not surround themselves with those who reinforce the idea that illness is inevitable. One who desires prosperity cannot accept the narrative that life is an endless struggle. Conviction can only be maintained in an environment where doubt has no place. The final step is to act as if reality has already changed. Conviction is not a passive idea, but a force reflected in every action. One who is convinced of their health moves with confidence, acts with vitality, and does not allow fear to dictate their behavior. One who believes in their prosperity does not act from scarcity or desperation, but from the certainty that abundance is already theirs. Reality responds to the attitude one adopts, for thought, when embodied in actions, becomes a command the universe cannot ignore. When conviction is firmly established in the mind, transformation is inevitable. There is no illness that can withstand a mind that refuses to accept it as part of its reality. There is no scarcity that can endure in a mind that only recognizes abundance. There is no adverse circumstance that can hold when the conviction of a new destiny has been established without cracks. Throughout history, great achievers have been those who understood this principle, those whose certainty was so strong that the world had to bend to their vision. Not because they were more capable than others, but because their conviction was unbreakable. The man who wishes to change his life must choose his beliefs with the precision of an alchemist selecting his ingredients. He cannot afford weak thoughts. He cannot tolerate doubt. He cannot toy with the possibility of failure. He must anchor his mind in certainty, and in doing so he will see reality itself transform in his favor. Conviction is not just a tool, it is the absolute key to transformation. Whoever possesses it has everything. Whoever lacks it remains trapped in the randomness of a world that seems to move without direction. But the truth is this: destiny is not random, but molded by the power of belief. And belief, when absolute, completely reshapes existence. Chapter 8. Willpower as an instrument of healing and prosperity. The human mind is the architect of its destiny, but willpower is the tool with which it shapes its creations. Without will, thought is weak, scattered, incapable of sustaining itself long enough to manifest a new reality. It is willpower that concentrates thought, gives it direction, and keeps it steady, even when external circumstances seem to contradict it. Will is the active principle of mental power, the fire that turns possibility into certainty and certainty into experience. The mistake many make is believing that willpower is merely a force of resistance, a mechanism to endure adversity or face difficulties with tenacity. But this is a limited concept. The true function of will is not to fight against what exists, but to sustain the vision of what is desired until reality conforms to it. It is not a tool for enduring pain, but for eradicating it. It is not a resource to adapt to scarcity, but to transform consciousness until abundance becomes inevitable. When this is understood, willpower ceases to be an exhausting effort and becomes a natural manifestation of inner power. The person who desires healing must exercise their will to reject every idea of illness, to firmly hold the image of a healthy and strong body without allowing doubt to divert them. They must not permit thoughts that contradict their intention. They must not entertain conversations that reinforce weakness. They must not accept the idea that illness has dominion over them. Their will must be a shield that protects their mind from external influences, and a beacon that keeps their attention fixed on the truth of their well-being. In the same way, one who seeks prosperity must use their will to direct their thoughts toward the certainty of abundance. It is not enough to desire wealth, nor even to affirm prosperity if the mind continues to oscillate between confidence and worry. Willpower must be employed to sustain the conviction that wealth is already on its way, that scarcity is nothing but a reflection of the past, and that everything necessary for fulfillment is available here and now. There can be no wavering, for doubt is the only real obstacle in the process of manifestation. But will is not only exercised in the mind, it must also be reflected in actions. One who affirms their health must behave like someone who is healthy, move with the confidence of one who does not fear illness, act with the vitality of one who has rejected weakness. One who declares prosperity must handle their affairs with the assurance of someone who knows that abundance flows into their life. It is not about pretending, but about living from certainty, aligning every thought and every action with the reality they have chosen to create. The problem for those who fail in their attempts to change their reality is the lack of direction in their will. They are like a candle in a stormy sea, carried from side to side by external influences, incapable of holding a thought with enough strength for it to materialize. They say they want health, but listen attentively to every symptom, analyze every diagnosis, fear every prognosis. They affirm that they want abundance, but react with anxiety to lack, worry about the future, and reinforce the thought of scarcity with every act of doubt. Their will is weak, and therefore their reality does not change. The secret of transformation lies in the absolute mastery of will. The mind must be trained to hold a single thought without deviation, to reject any idea that contradicts the established intention. This is not easy at first because the mind has been programmed for dispersion, for contradiction, for fear. But just as a muscle strengthens with exercise, will develops with practice. Every time one chooses to hold certainty instead of doubt, every time appearances are ignored in favor of the inner vision, every time one acts in coherence with the chosen thought, willpower strengthens. And when will reaches its full development, transformation is immediate and irreversible. It is not the mechanical repetition of affirmations that changes life, but the will with which they are sustained. It is not the fleeting desire that shapes reality, but the unwavering decision to align with a higher truth. It is not physical effort that generates results, but the clarity with which the mind is directed and the firmness with which conviction is held. Will is the true power behind all healing and all prosperity. It is the energy that keeps thought on course, that protects it from external influences, that drives it toward manifestation without the possibility of failure. One who masters their will masters their destiny. One who leaves it in the hands of chance remains at the mercy of circumstances. When man learns to direct his will without hesitation, reality has no choice but to obey. The body responds to the image the mind holds with certainty. Abundance flows when there is no contradiction in thought. Life itself becomes a reflection of the internal decision, because will is the key that opens all doors. The world is full of those who wish, who hope, who try, but only those whose will is firm manage to transform their existence. There is no other law, no other secret. Will is the supreme force that turns thought into experience, intention into reality, vision into living truth. Chapter 9. Thought as Medicine, How the Mind Purifies the Body. The human body is nothing more than the external manifestation of the mind. Every organ, every cell, every function responds to the invisible commands of thought. And just as thought can strengthen and heal, it can also weaken and sicken. What medicine has called disease is nothing but a reflection of a mental disharmony, a distortion in consciousness that has been projected onto matter. Therefore, the true cure does not reside in external substances, but in the restoration of mental balance. The mind is the supreme medicine, and when used correctly, the body has no choice but to align with its natural perception. Throughout my experience, I have witnessed cases where traditional medicine has deemed a person incurable, but upon correcting their thinking, they recovered their health in ways inexplicable to science. I have also observed the opposite. Individuals who, out of fear of becoming ill, developed symptoms and ailments without any apparent physical cause, simply because their mind was convinced it should be so. These cases are not exceptions but irrefutable proof of the power of thought over matter. Disease is not an external agent that attacks the body. It is an idea that has been accepted as truth and by the law of thought has become flesh. To understand how the mind purifies the body, it is necessary to comprehend how thought contaminates and sickens. Every negative emotion, fear, anxiety, resentment, hopelessness, generates a vibration that disturbs internal balance. A prolonged fearful thought contracts the nerves, weakens the organs, and blocks regenerative processes. A sustained feeling of anger poisons the blood, disrupts digestion, and deteriorates tissues. And sadness, when it becomes a habitual state, drains vital energy until it completely extinguishes the body's strength. None of this is random. Every illness is the crystallization of an idea that has been nurtured in the mind until it becomes a tangible reality. But just as thought can sicken, it can also heal. The purification of the body begins with the purification of the mind. Where there was fear, trust must take root. Where there was anxiety, peace must be established. Where there were doubts about one's health, there must be the absolute certainty that the body is a perfect mechanism, designed for balance and regeneration. The body is the servant of the mind, and when the mind commands health with conviction, the body obeys. The mistake of traditional medicine has been focusing on the symptom instead of the cause. It has attempted to cure disease by attacking its external manifestations without addressing the root of the problem, which is always mental. A pain in the body is nothing more than a signal that something in the consciousness is in conflict. A weakened organ is simply the reflection of an idea of fragility that has been sustained with enough intensity to materialize. And while a chemical remedy may temporarily relieve discomfort, if the thought that caused it remains intact, the disease will return in another form because the cause has not been eliminated. But one who understands that thought is the source of all health no longer fears illness, because they know they have control over their body. They do not accept diagnoses as condemnations, because they understand that no condition is permanent if the mind is reprogrammed in the right direction. When consciousness aligns with the truth that health is the natural state, the body responds with renewed vitality. Cellular regeneration, the strength of the immune system, and vital energy all activate in harmony with the predominant thought. There is no illness that cannot be reversed when the belief that sustains it is dissolved. There is no incurable ailment when the mind is freed from error. The body is a perfect reflection of consciousness, and just as it has been shaped by thoughts of weakness, it can be restored with thoughts of strength. It is not time that heals, but the correction of thought. It is not medicine that cures, but the absolute certainty that illness is an illusion that can vanish at any moment. Therefore, one who wishes to purify their body must begin by observing their mind. They must ask themselves, what thoughts have been governing my consciousness? Have I fed the fear of illness? Have I upheld the belief in the fragility of the body? Have I allowed worry and anguish to poison my system? And upon discovering the mental origin of their condition, they must replace it with a new idea, a firm and immovable conviction that health is their natural state, that their body is strong, that every cell responds to the perfection of their thought. I have seen people heal in an instant when they realized they were never truly ill, but merely deceived by their own fear. And I have also seen those who, clinging to their belief in illness, have deteriorated their bodies to the end simply because their mind refused to accept the possibility of healing. The difference between one and the other is not the diagnosis nor the physical condition, but the thought each has chosen to sustain. Thought is the supreme medicine, and its power surpasses any external remedy. But this medicine only works when administered with conviction. One who firmly believes in their health experiences it. One who doubts reinforces their ailment. There is no exception to this law, for the body has no will of its own. It simply obeys the pattern of the consciousness that animates it. Just as water cleanses a wound and fresh air purifies the lungs, right thinking restores every cell in the body. It does not matter how advanced an illness may seem or how long discomfort has persisted. When the mind aligns with the truth of health, the body responds without resistance. Regeneration is immediate when consciousness stops sustaining the error. Illness is a lie that the mind has accepted as truth, and like all lies, it collapses the moment the truth is recognized. Pure thought is the only medicine man needs. A mind free of fear is the only infallible remedy. Absolute conviction in the perfection of one's body is the only guarantee of unshakable health. There is no greater power in the universe than consciousness in action, and when man learns to direct his thoughts with precision, his body becomes an immaculate temple, immune to disease, vibrant with the energy of life itself. This is the truth that has been ignored for centuries, but it is available to anyone who dares to see it. Chapter 10. Directed Imagination, Forging Reality from Within. The mind of man is the origin of all his experience, and within it lies a power so vast that few have known how to fully harness it. This power is imagination, the faculty to create images, to conceive worlds before they exist, to visualize what has yet to manifest in tangible reality. Imagination is the seed of all transformation, the tool with which the mind shapes the body, life, and circumstances. But like all power, it must be used with knowledge and precision. If man does not direct his imagination, it will direct him. If he does not consciously use it to build his well-being, he will end up using it unconsciously to reinforce his suffering. From childhood, Man has used imagination effortlessly. A child at play does not need proof to believe in his fantasy world. He lives it with absolute conviction. But as he grows, society trains him to replace imagination with logic, to consider only what can be seen with the senses, to dismiss as unreal everything that has not yet occurred. Thus, man loses control of his greatest creative faculty and allows his mind to be shaped by appearances instead of shaping his own destiny. But the truth is that imagination is not mere mental play. It is the source of all manifestation. Before anything exists in the physical world, it must first exist in the mind. There is no structure that was not first a blueprint, no creation that was not first an idea. Everything man experiences has been imagined beforehand, whether consciously or unconsciously. He who understands this acquires absolute dominion over his reality. If thought is the cause of all experience, and imagination is the mechanism that gives shape to that thought, then man holds in his hands the power to transform any condition simply by modifying the image he holds in his mind. What is imagined with clarity and conviction becomes reality. But imagination without direction is a double-edged sword. He who constantly imagines illness, even if out of fear to avoid it, gives it strength in his life. He who imagines scarcity, even in the form of worry, draws it closer, because imagination does not distinguish between what is desired and what is feared. It only responds to the intensity of the image held in the mind. Man is always creating, but if he does not control his inner images, he creates by default instead of doing so with purpose. This is why directed imagination is the key to transformation. It is not enough to want to be healthy. One must imagine oneself with a strong, vital, radiant body. It is not enough to desire abundance. One must see oneself living in wealth, acting with the confidence of someone who already possesses what they desire. It is not enough to hope for better circumstances. One must build them in the mind with the same clarity that an architect visualizes his work before laying the first brick. The outer world is nothing more than the reflection of the inner world, and when the inner image changes, reality must follow. To use this power effectively, the mental image must meet three fundamental conditions. First, it must be vivid and detailed. The mind responds to what it can conceive clearly. It is not enough to think of being healthy. One must imagine the body functioning in perfect harmony, feel the energy vibrating in every cell, visualize every organ operating at its highest potential. It is not enough to think of being prosperous. One must imagine wealth in all its forms, feel the tranquility of abundance mentally, with the certainty that prosperity is an inevitable reality. The clearer the image, the more powerful its influence on reality will be. Second, it must be charged with emotion. Imagination without emotion is like a seed without water. The mind accepts what it feels as true, not what it merely tells itself. If a man visualizes health but still feels fear, he is sending contradictory signals to his subconscious. If he imagines wealth but still experiences anxiety about money, he is blocking his own manifestation. Emotion is the proof that the image has been accepted by the mind, and once accepted, reality has no choice but to align with it. Third, it must be repeated until it becomes a certainty. The mind is malleable, but also resistant to change when it has been programmed with images of fear, weakness, or scarcity. That is why directed imagination must be practiced until the new image becomes more real than the old belief. Just as a rock is shaped by water through constant repetition, reality is shaped by the mental image that is held persistently. The greatest mistake of those who try to apply this principle is to doubt during the process. They want to change their life, but constantly look at current appearances and allow themselves to be influenced by them. They see that their body continues to show symptoms and then allow fear to interfere with the image of health they were trying to hold. They see that wealth has not yet arrived and then go back to imagining scarcity with more intensity than abundance. They do not realize that the change is already underway, but requires absolute faith to materialize. Directed imagination is not mere fantasy. It is the most powerful creation mechanism that exists. Everything man sees around him was imagined before becoming tangible, and he who understands this becomes the master of his destiny. He no longer waits for circumstances to change to feel secure. He first changes his mental image and allows reality to adjust to it. He no longer lets himself be carried away by appearances. He knows the cause lies in the mind, and that the image held with the greatest clarity will inevitably manifest. The power of imagination is absolute. He who masters it can transform illness into health, lack into wealth, despair into certainty. But this power can only be successfully used if man is willing to sustain his vision with unshakable faith, regardless of what his senses tell him in the present. The future is not predetermined. It is being built in this very moment with every image the mind projects. He who consciously chooses his thoughts, who directs his imagination with precision, who rejects every image of limitation and holds only the vision of his well-being, will discover that reality is nothing more than the reflection of his consciousness. And when this principle is applied with mastery, there is nothing that cannot be transformed, because the mind is the only law that governs existence. Chapter 11, Living Without Fear, the Key to Health and Wealth. Fear is the greatest prison in which mankind has been confined. There is no illness that has not been nourished by fear, nor scarcity that has not been caused by the anxiety of loss. Fear is the only real enemy, the only poison that weakens the body, the only obstacle that blocks abundance. And yet, man has accepted it as a natural part of his existence, unaware that its sole function is to paralyze, subjugate, and divert him from the truth. From birth, the mind is programmed to fear. It is taught to fear illness, poverty, death, failure, and criticism. It is constantly warned about dangers to avoid, risks not to take, invisible forces that can destroy it at any moment. And by accepting these fears without questioning them, man becomes a slave to his own beliefs, creating for himself a life of limitations and suffering. But fear is not an external force. It is not a real monster lurking in the dark. It is only a thought, an idea that has been repeated so many times that it seems to have power. But in reality, it has no substance other than a shadow cast by the mind. It is not illness that destroys the body, but the fear of getting sick. It is not scarcity that ruins man's life, but the anguish of losing what he has. Fear is the creator of suffering, and where there is fear, illness and poverty find fertile ground to grow. That is why living without fear is the key to health and wealth. There is no greater protection against disease than a mind that does not fear it. There is no more powerful magnet for prosperity than a spirit free from worry. Health is not maintained with remedies or excessive precautions, but with absolute trust in the body's perception and its natural ability to regenerate. Wealth is not obtained through effort and struggle, but with the certainty that abundance is the natural state of the universe. When fear disappears, everything else aligns. The problem is that man has been trained to believe that fear is necessary, that without it he would be in decline, that fear keeps him safe. But this is a lie. Fear does not prevent danger, it attracts it. Fear does not protect health, it destroys it. Fear does not secure wealth, it blocks it. There is no situation where fear is useful because its only function is to weaken the mind and chain the spirit. That is why the first step to living without fear is to unmask it, to observe it closely and ask oneself, what am I truly afraid of? Is it a real threat or just a mental construct? Has what I fear ever happened, or is it just a possibility I've nurtured in my mind? When fear is analyzed, its falsehood is revealed. It becomes clear that it is nothing but an insubstantial thought, a shadow that disappears the moment it is confronted with the light of truth. The second step is to take away its control. The man who allows fear to dictate his actions is training his power to an illusion. If he fears illness, he will live in constant vigilance, observing every symptom, analyzing every discomfort. And with this he will give life to the illness he is trying to avoid. If he fears poverty, he will cling desperately to what he has, fearful of spending, anxious about the future, and with this, he will block the abundance that would otherwise flow toward him. Fear can only govern those who surrender to it, but the one who, instead of yielding, stands firm in his trust, discovers that fear is impotent. Illness cannot touch one who does not give it space in their mind. Scarcity cannot manifest in the life of one who refuses to believe in it. The outer world only reflects what man holds within, and when fear is eradicated, reality responds with health and wealth. The third step is to live from certainty. It is not enough to reject fear. It is necessary to replace it with absolute conviction. The mind cannot remain empty. If fear is expelled, but that space is not filled with truth, it will return with greater force. That is why anyone who chooses to live without fear must fill their consciousness with thoughts of health, strength, and abundance. They must affirm with every action that well-being is their natural state, that wealth flows effortlessly, that life is safe and generous. Nothing can weaken one who has been liberated from fear. There is no virus, no accident, no economic crisis that can touch one who has risen above the concerns of the world. Because the world is nothing but a reflection of the mind, and the mind that only sees health and abundance cannot experience anything different. Fear is the only real obstacle man must overcome. There is no greater enemy, no greater deception. But the moment it is confronted with truth, it disappears without a trace. And when fear disappears, life becomes an unstoppable flow of health, prosperity, and absolute well-being. Chapter 12. The Truth in Action, the Secret of Manifestation. Knowing the truth is not enough. Understanding that thought shapes reality, that illness is a mental illusion, that scarcity is only a projection of collective consciousness, means nothing if this knowledge does not translate into action. Truth only has power when it is lived. Thinking about health while acting with fear is a contradiction that hinders healing. Repeating wealth affirmations while feeling anxiety about money is a conflict that blocks abundance. The true secret of manifestation is not only right thinking, but action aligned with the certainty that the new reality already exists. The person who understands this principle stops living as though they are a victim of circumstances. They no longer wait for their environment to change in order to feel secure. They no longer depend on external conditions to believe in their well-being. Inside, they have already decided what is true, and their life becomes an extension of that certainty. They do not talk about their symptoms if they desire health. They do not lament their financial situation if they desire prosperity. They do not allow themselves to doubt what they have decreed as their reality. They act with the certainty of one who knows their destiny is not written by chance, but by the one who directs it. The problem for many is that they have accepted the truth intellectually, but have not allowed it to become the only law of their existence. They have understood that the mind is creative, but they still fear illness. They have learned that thought directs life, but they still observe scarcity with worry. Their mistake is not a lack of knowledge, but a lack of application. Truth cannot be an abstract concept. It must be a conviction that permeates every action, every decision, every word. The one who has decided that health is their natural state walks with the confidence of one who has already been healed. They do not analyze symptoms, they do not allow fear to invade them, and they do not leave space for the possibility of illness in their mind and behavior. If discomfort arises, they are not disturbed because they know their body responds to the law of their thought, and regeneration is immediate. When conviction is absolute, they do not grant power to the ailment, because they know that the only reality is the one their mind has decreed. In the same way, the one who has decreed abundance does not act from scarcity. They do not fear spending. They are not trapped by financial anxiety, and they do not feel limited by what they see around them. They live with the certainty that wealth flows to them, not because they depend on an external source, but because they have aligned their consciousness with prosperity. Every decision they make is guided by the confidence in their abundance, and that is why abundance manifests effortlessly. The key to manifestation is holding the truth with absolute firmness, regardless of what the senses show in the present. The person who lets themselves be carried away by what they see becomes a slave to their reality, but the one who acts from the truth they have chosen transforms their world from within. They do not allow appearances to dictate their mental state because they know that appearances are merely reflections of past beliefs, and the only way to change them is by holding the new image with unwavering conviction. There is no exception to this law. Every real transformation happens first in consciousness and then in experience. There are no shortcuts, no magic formulas. Manifestation is the inevitable result of a mind that has accepted the truth and has refused to act contrary to it. Every word spoken, every gesture, every thought held with emotion is an order that reality obeys. Many fail because they do not understand the importance of this principle. They cling to positive affirmations, but continue reacting with fear to illness. They declare their abundance, but continue limiting themselves with thoughts of lack. They expect to see change before believing in it, not realizing that change only happens once the belief is firmly established first. Manifestation is not an external phenomenon, but a reflection of internal certainty. Truth is not something that is expected. It is something that is embodied. The one who is healthy does not doubt their body. The one who is rich does not worry about their provision. The one who is free does not fear the future, not because the outer world confirms it immediately, but because they have already established it in their mind as the only possible reality. Their action is consistent with their thought, and that is why their thought becomes their experience. The one who masters this principle becomes the absolute master of their destiny. They are no longer swayed by what others believe. They are no longer influenced by the world's opinions. They no longer hesitate in the face of adversity. Their faith is their shield. Their certainty is their power. They have understood the secret of manifestation. It is not the world that dictates their reality, but their own conviction. Whoever dares to live this way will discover that nothing is beyond their reach. Health, wealth, peace, happiness, everything is within the domain of their thoughts and the firmness with which they act from the truth they have chosen to hold. And when truth becomes action, life has no other choice but to align with it. Chapter 13, How to Direct the Mind Without Falling into Self-Deception. Thought is the most powerful tool a person possesses, but if not used precisely, it can become their greatest trap. The mind has the ability to create realities, but it also has the ability to build illusions that can lead the individual away from the truth. Mastering the mind is not just about holding positive thoughts, but ensuring that they are rooted in truth and not simply an evasion of reality. Self-deception is the greatest obstacle on the path of transformation. It occurs when an individual clings to an idea without truly accepting it in their consciousness. They want to believe in their health, but continue to fear illness. They desire abundance, but inside they still feel limited. They declare their strength, but act with insecurity. In these cases, there is no true direction of the mind, but an attempt to cover up internal conflict with empty words. Thought only has power when it is sincere, when it is completely aligned with internal conviction. The mistake of many is to confuse mental direction with the generation of reality. They believe that thinking about health means ignoring symptoms, that affirming abundance implies acting irresponsibly with money, or that maintaining a success mindset means closing their eyes to obstacles. But truth does not work that way. Directing the mind is not about denying what exists, but affirming what one chooses to create. It is not about pretending that illness isn't there, but understanding that its origin is mental and working to reconfigure that cause. It is not about acting as if money doesn't matter, but changing the relationship with abundance from within. Transformation occurs when the mind is re-educated, not when reality is ignored. To avoid self-deception, the key is coherence between thought, emotion, and action. A sustained thought without emotion is an empty affirmation. An emotion without action is wasted energy. And an action without conviction is an effort that produces no results. Real change happens when the mind directs the emotion with certainty, and the action follows that direction without contradictions. Self-deception also appears when the individual seeks external proof before consolidating their internal belief. They want to see improvement in their body before believing in their health. They expect to receive money before feeling prosperous. They look for signs in the world before trusting their creative power. But manifestation does not occur from the outside in. It occurs the other way around. The mind shapes reality, and if the individual waits for proof before believing, they are reversing the natural order of creation. True mastery of the mind is achieved when the individual remains firm in their conviction without the need for external confirmation. They know that health is their natural state, even if their body does not yet reflect it. They feel abundance, even if their environment has not yet changed. They act as a winner, even if the world has not yet recognized them. They no longer need to see to believe because they understand that believing is what will lead them to see. But for this process to be authentic and not just an illusion, thought must be backed by deep understanding. It is not about mechanically repeating affirmations, but about understanding the truth behind each thought. It is not enough to say, "I am healthy." One must understand that the body is a reflection of the mental state and that each cell responds to the direction of consciousness. It is not enough to say, "I am prosperous." One must integrate the idea that abundance is a universal law and that scarcity is just an imposed belief. The greater the understanding of these principles, the harder it will be to fall into self-deception. Another key aspect to avoid illusion is the constant observation of the mind. The individual must examine their thoughts honestly and ask themselves, do I truly believe this, or do I just want to believe it? Am I aligned with my affirmation, or is there internal resistance? If the answer is not clear, then it is time to delve deeper, to investigate the origin of doubt, to strengthen conviction before moving forward. It is not about forcing a belief, but about building it on solid foundations. Self-deception is not a matter of imitation, but of individual transformation. Each thought is a distinct universe, and true change only occurs when the individual owns their power from their own understanding. That is why the final key to directing the mind without falling into self-deception is to act with coherence until the truth becomes a lived reality. The mind is like a muscle that must be strengthened with repetition and consistency. Every right thought is a step toward transformation. Every aligned action reinforces the new reality. When a person learns to direct their mind with precision, without illusions or contradictions, their life becomes an impeccable manifestation of their will. They no longer need to wait for miracles, because they themselves have become the creator of their destiny. Chapter 14. The freedom of the thinker living in truth. True freedom is not found in the absence of external limitations or in the ability to do whatever one desires without restrictions. The only real freedom is the freedom of thought. As long as the mind is subject to the influence of false beliefs, to societal manipulation, to fear and doubt, the person will remain a prisoner, even though there are no visible chains holding them. But when they discover that their thought is the only power that determines their reality, and that they have absolute control over what they believe and project, they become a truly free being. The free thinker is not the one who simply rejects the ideas imposed by others, but the one who has learned to question everything, including their own beliefs. They do not accept anything without subjecting it to the test of truth. They are not swayed by collective thought or the opinions of the world. Their mind is not determined by tradition, education, or circumstances. It is only governed by the certainty of what they have discovered for themselves. This state of freedom is rare in the world. Most people do not think for themselves. They simply repeat what they have heard, react to what they see, and allow their reality to be shaped by external forces. They cling to ideas they have never examined, defend opinions they have not consciously formed, and live under rules they have never questioned. Their life is a reflection of thought that does not belong to them, and as a result they suffer without understanding the cause of their suffering. But the one who has understood the power of the mind, who has seen how their thoughts shape their destiny, who has experienced in their own life the transformation that occurs when they align with reality, can no longer be enslaved by any imposed idea. Their thought is their temple, their refuge, their absolute domain. They do not allow fear to govern them because they know it is a mental construct. They are not dragged down by the negativity of the world because they understand that the external world is merely a reflection of the internal. They do not seek approval from others because they have discovered that the only validation that matters is the certainty of their own knowledge. Living in truth means living from the inside out. It does not mean ignoring the current reality, but understanding that reality is malleable, that it is not a fixed destiny, but a dynamic result of thought. It means stopping reacting to appearances and starting to create consciously from conviction. It means no longer accepting limitations simply because others have accepted them, and instead choosing what one wants to experience with full certainty that it is possible. The free thinker is no longer affected by the chaos of the world, not because they do not see it, but because they have learned not to identify with it. They know that illness exists for those who accept it, that scarcity is real only for those who believe in it, that suffering is a mental construct that can be dismantled. They do not need to fight against the illusion because they have simply stopped believing in it. But this freedom is not obtained by a simple act of will. It is not enough to say, "I am free," if the mind is still trapped in old thought patterns. It is a process of mental discipline, of constant self-observation, of eliminating every idea that is not aligned with truth. It is the work of a master, not a student, and it requires courage because it involves abandoning all false security, all excuses, all justifications for failure or suffering. The free man does not seek to blame others. He does not blame society, his education, or his circumstances. He knows that he is the only one responsible for his experience, and in that responsibility, he finds his greatest power. He does not wait for the world to change in order to feel at peace. He first establishes peace within himself and lets the world adjust to his new vibration. He does not demand that others understand him because he understands that truth does not need to be defended. It only needs to be lived. This state of consciousness is the final point of the thinker's journey. When the mind is completely free, life becomes an uninterrupted manifestation of well-being, abundance, and balance. There is no more struggle, no more fear, no more unnecessary suffering. There is only certainty, clarity, and the joy of knowing that one is the absolute creator of their own existence. Whoever reaches this point has attained the greatest truth, that there were never any real barriers, that the only prison was the belief in limitation, and that freedom has always been there, waiting to be recognized.